It was 2 in the morning, and I was on my knees in the mud, wrestling with a blown transformer fuse during a massive thunderstorm. My phone buzzed with a notification from my doorbell camera. I ignored it. I'm a senior grid operations manager for the Tri-County area, and when the power goes out for 50,000 people, my phone doesn't stop buzzing until the lights are back on. My name is Caleb Thorne, and for 20 years, I've kept the electricity flowing through storms, fires, and floods. I drive a heavy-duty utility truck. It has to be big because it holds my specialized tools, my emergency gear, and it needs to be able to climb a utility pole access road buried in 2 feet of snow. But to Mrs. Patricia Gable, the newly elected president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, my truck was a blight on the community aesthetic. I'd bought my house in Whispering Pines just 3 months ago. It was a fixer-upper at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. I chose it specifically because it backs up to the main transmission easement, the high-voltage lines that feed the entire valley. This meant no rear neighbors, and, more importantly, I could be on the emergency access road in 30 seconds, or so I thought. When I finally got home at 5:30 a.m., soaked to the bone and smelling like ozone, I saw my driveway was empty. My first thought was that my truck had been stolen. Then I saw the neon orange sticker plastered on my front door. Parking violation, commercial vehicle, towed by order of HOA. I just stood there in the pouring rain, staring at that sticker. My truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was my mobile command center. It contained schematics and a specialized phase tester I desperately needed to finish the night's repairs. I called the towing company. They told me it was a direct HOA request. The release fee was $450, cash only, and they wouldn't open until 9 a.m. I hung up the phone and walked straight across the street to Mrs. Gable's house. I knew it was her. She'd already left 3 nasty notes on my windshield in the last week, complaining about the mud on my tires. I rang her doorbell. It was 6 a.m. She opened the door, wearing a silk robe, holding a delicate cup of tea. She looked at my soaked, muddy uniform and actually smiled. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I assume you found the notice. Commercial vehicles belong in the designated storage lot, not in our driveways. It's an eyesore, and the covenants are perfectly clear." I tried to explain that I was an essential utility worker, that we were in a declared state of emergency, and that she had just towed a vital response vehicle right in the middle of a massive storm. She didn't care one bit. She told me she had the full authority as president to remove violations immediately. Then she closed the door in my face. So, I walked back to my house. I didn't call the police, I didn't call a lawyer. I called my dispatch center. I told them I was unable to respond to the critical substation fault because my primary vehicle had been impounded by a third party. I also informed them that the substation feeding the entire Whispering Pines neighborhood was now running on a temporary bypass circuit, and that circuit required manual load balancing every 4 hours. Otherwise, the safety relays would automatically trip, the only tool that could do the balancing. It was locked in the back of my impounded truck. I went inside, took a hot shower, and made some coffee. At exactly 7:15 a.m., the power in Whispering Pines went out. Not a flicker. It was a hard, clunking shutoff. Total darkness. At 7:30 a.m., I saw Mrs. Gable burst out of her house, looking frantic. She saw me sitting on my porch, sipping my coffee, and started yelling that the power was out. I calmly told her that I had noticed. She demanded that I fix it immediately. I simply explained that I couldn't. I was technically off duty, and more importantly, I didn't have my truck. She started screaming about her important Zoom meetings and her husband's medical equipment. I told her that the power grid is a complex system, and by removing the means of repair, she had personally triggered a very direct and predictable consequence. About 10 minutes later, a massive utility bucket truck, the size of a fire engine, rumbled into our quiet cul-de-sac. It was my boss, Mike. He pulled right up to the curb, completely blocking Mrs. Gable's driveway. Mike hopped out and asked her if she was the one who authorized the impound. When she started sputtering about HOA rules and community aesthetics, Mike's voice boomed across the street. He told her that interfering with a utility worker during a declared emergency is a felony, and that her actions had endangered the power supply for 300 homes. Then came the part she really didn't like. He informed her that the utility company would be billing the HOA for the emergency crew rollout and the subsequent grid strain at a rate of roughly $1,500 an hour. He also told her that since she had deemed our vehicles commercial violations, we would now be marking the entire neighborhood as a restricted access zone. From now on, no more non-emergency maintenance. If a streetlight goes out, it stays out. If a transformer needs a routine check, it gets skipped. By now, the neighbors were coming out of their houses, drawn by the shouting. When they realized Patricia had towed the power guy's truck during a storm, causing the outage, they turned on her instantly. One guy threatened to sue her personally if his basement flooded because his sump pump had no power. Mrs. Gable looked like she was going to faint right there on her lawn. When the tow yard finally opened at 9 a.m., she drove me there herself and paid the $450 release fee in complete, humiliated silence. I got my truck back, drove home, and reset the main relay in less than 5 minutes. The lights hummed back on across the neighborhood. That night, there was an emergency HOA meeting. I didn't bother to attend, but I heard the results pretty quickly. The board voted to remove Mrs. Gable as president immediately, citing gross negligence. They also passed a brand new bylaw that specifically exempts all essential service vehicles from any and all parking restrictions. A few days later, the HOA received a bill for $4,500 from the utility company, which they paid using the very funds Mrs. Gable had proudly bragged about saving the community. About a week later, I saw her walking her dog. She kept her head down and would uneven look in the direction of my truck parked in my driveway. The lesson here is simple. Never mess with the people who keep your lights on. We might drive trucks you think are ugly, but we run the complex world you live in. If you make it hard for us to do our jobs, you just might find yourself sitting alone in the dark, realizing that your aesthetic standards don't generate any electricity. Thanks for watching this story of suburban justice. If you've ever had an HOA overstep its bounds, tell us all about it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories where the entitled finally get exactly what's coming to them.